The purpose of this presentation is to draw our attention to attention deficit hyperactive disorder. This is a disorder that is commonly diagnosed among children, though there are adults who are sometimes diagnosed, but the most common diagnosis is among children, and boys are usually among children, boys are usually more diagnosed than girls. According to the statistics, a diagnosis of ADHD is more likely to be incorrect than any other diagnosis for mental health disorder among children. I'm repeating that. A diagnosis of ADHD is more likely to be incorrect than any other disorder diagnosed among children. The cost for treating ADHD per year in this country is $122 billion, and Medicaid pays for about 25% of that. That means that a misdiagnosed or a wrong diagnosis of ADHD is costing all of us. In this presentation, I want to talk about the diagnostic criteria. I want to look at treatment options, and I want to introduce us to an intervention, a pre-diagnosis intervention called ART, A-R-T, that is Attention Remedial Therapy. ART is not a treatment, it's an intervention to prevent wrongful diagnosis. With ADHD, they say that according to the DSM criteria, there must be a period of inattention and hyperactive impulsivity for at least a period of 6 months consistently. In the diagnostic criteria, there are a number of criteria with inattention. Number one covers inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity under diagnostic criteria A. For each of those criteria, for inattention and hyperactivity and impulsivity, according to the DSM, there must be 6 of 9 symptoms observed for a certain period of time. If the 6 of 9 symptoms are not observed, you do not have, I repeat, you do not have a diagnosis of ADHD. There are many disorders among children that sometimes come with especially hyperactivity and impulsivity. So you got to be looking at a comorbid disorder, not for ADHD. As far as treatment is concerned, there are the standard Ritalin and other medication has done its time and served its purpose. It's time to look at a new treatment option for ADHD. Now, researchers have already determined that there are certain brain areas that are responsible for certain activity with respect to ADHD. The motor cortex is responsible for hyperactivity. The orbital frontal cortex is responsible for impulsivity, and the cingulate gyrus, the anterior cingulate gyrus, is responsible for selective attention. So it is time when prescribers are prescribing medication for ADHD, you have got to look beyond the standard and select a cocktail of medication that will treat those individual symptoms with less side effects. Which leads me to the next and most important part of this presentation, ART, Attention Remedial Therapy. Now, attention remedial therapy is not a treatment for ADHD. it is an intervention to prevent a wrong diagnosis. When a child begins to display inactivity and inattention, hyperactivity and inattention, it is time to refer that child for attention remedial therapy. What this attention remedial therapy does, it gives the child small stages of small activities in different levels of difficulty, at different stages and different time lengths, and manages the child's activity, completing those activities. And that the child is able to complete one activity, then you increase the difficulty and the time length till you get a child completing, spending 20 or 30 minutes focused and being focused on a single activity. That if you get a child, the program usually lasts for about six weeks, or could go as much as to 14 weeks, depending on the child. If you get a child to successfully complete the ART program and is not having an attention, a further problem with attention, then you would mitigate a diagnosis of attention deficit disorder, and you and don't have the need to have this child filled with various medication. In a quick review, let me say again, attention deficit disorder is a neurological neurological condition among children which leads in hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention. Care must be exercised in making a diagnosis. All the criteria have got to be met. If the criteria are not met, you don't have a diagnosis. And when you have a diagnosis of ADHD, there are options. A clinician should be selective of the medication that he or she prescribes, targeting specific areas and specific concern to have less side effects. And finally, before a child is referred for medication or other kinds of therapy, you need to introduce them to art. Thank you for listening.